That's correct.
Right? It won, it was a three-time
gold medal winner.
Three-time gold medal winner at the Robo Games competition.
In fact,
He has the medal. So without further ado, enough of me. Please join me in welcoming Kevin Roche.
Can you all hear me all right? I have a mic. It's not too loud, but I think it's just loud enough. How many of you were here for David Kaufman's talk a month ago? Few of you. Good. So David is a friend of mine. He is the founder of the International Robo Games, which is where we met and where ThinBot is taking its medals. And so he is a roboticist on purpose. And on the other hand, I describe myself as an accidental roboticist. I work for IBM Research. I have for 33 years, believe it or not. Just so you don't have to do the math, I was born in 1960. I graduated from UC Berkeley in 1983, and I was already working for IBM when I graduated. So I have a very different take on robots than David did, because the things that we just now expect as robots didn't exist 55 years ago. They just weren't there. But to make it clear that today is supposed to be about the fun side of this, that's why my mohawk is up. IBM doesn't care that I have a mohawk, but I don't wear it up at work because I never know when I'm going to stick my head inside a machine. And, you know, hairspray and super clean alkaline vacuum systems do not mix. Plus, if it gets tangled, then I've got to cut the mohawk. Similarly, I am actually wearing a team shirt for the robot. So if you want to see lots of pictures of our robot, our team page is on Facebook. It's facebook.com/DARPABots. That's DARPABOTS. Yes, it's a joke, you know, about the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, who actually funded some of my work at IBM. We're the Drake's Advanced Research Project Agency. So if you want to find more pictures of ThinBot, there are plenty of them out on Facebook. That's our largest gallery. So without further ado, I want you to meet my first robot. When I was 6 or 7, this is Zobor. He was a Zeroid. And my brother and I had two different ones. I think his was Zintar. They were pretty cool. They could go backwards. And if you put the right little thing on the floor, when they hit it, they'd go the other direction. And he could pull a little wagon. And he had a magnet for a hand, and the other hand he could with a scoop, and he had claws, and he would run right off the edge of the table. Because, well, he looked like what we think of as a robot from science fiction films and comic books and all. He didn't really have a whole lot of smarts.
Kevin, how big was he?
He was about this tall. He was about 9 or 10 inches tall. You can actually find them on eBay. They were re-released in the 70s. And they tried again in the 80s, so you can actually still find the toys on eBay if you look for them. And they were fun. There was a whole assortment, and then they did another one where they mixed and matched parts. They just got crazier and crazier. So when I was thinking about what was my first real robot that I owned, it might be that one, or it might have been this. How many of you play with Legos? How many of the grown-ups play with Legos? Come on, admit it. So, when I was 7 or 8, my mom took me to the store and bought me the first Lego motor. And that little switch sticking up, let's see, that little switch there, it went 2 directions. So the motor could go forward or backwards. And it had all these funky wheels, so that you could actually set it up to run on rails, or you could use them as pulleys. And so I was able to make Lego things that moved. Now we have, of course, the Lego Mindstorms and the very smart robots, but you could, oops. Did we go to sleep? There we go. Oh, that's right, there's a blank page in there. Oops. So you can really make a case that in terms of building my own robots, this is the first thing I had to play with. My dad, well, like both my parents and all my grandparents, always built things. They were always making, part of it was they grown up and gone through the Depression, where you made do, you made your own if you couldn't afford to buy it. And I picked up a lot from them. And so making my own toys that could move was more fun than buying toys. They could do one or two things. Then, this is supposed to be a blank page. Then I went to college. Well, I went to high school, then I went to college. I kept making things. I studied physics, and I ended up working at IBM. And back then, when you were in physics and you were doing experiments, you had all of these instruments. You either had to write down the numbers, or you might have a pen that recorded it on a piece of graph paper, and then you had to use a ruler and translate that into numbers. This was how you collected data to do research. Or if you had an oscilloscope, you would have a special Polaroid camera, and you would take a picture of the screen, and then you would measure things from that photograph. That's where we were. And then in 1981, things changed. Because that's when the personal computer came out. This is the IBM Pc, the 5051, very first one. So it came out 2 years before I was hired as a full-time employee at IBM. So by the time I was there at research, it was a couple years old, and people were figuring out the computer could write down the numbers for you. That's basically what it did. It figured out ways that a computer could talk to the instruments that were measuring things and get the numbers out and essentially write them down for you. These, of course, were the days of floppy disks. And when the first hard drive came out, that was a big deal because then you could write down more numbers. But that was the start. And from there, we then learned how to, instead of just collecting information using the computers, we learned how to start controlling things, turning things on and off, and making them move. And so my very first real robot at the lab was built around 1986. All of these next robots I'm going to show you are called thin film deposition systems. What that means is we're airbrushing with atoms. How many of you have ever airbrushed or spray painted to a stencil? I see one, two, a few. Well, that's what I do. Only instead of doing it with paint, I'm doing it with atoms, and I can control how thick things are down to one atom thick. It means I can build brand new materials, and that's what we study in my work there. So I'm not going to go into the science hardcore. That's not why we're here, but that's why I needed to be able to have very, very fine control over things. So this particular robot was pretty simple in terms of what I had to control. So there were 5 motors, and the one in the middle spun a little turntable that held the wafers that I wanted to coat with atoms. And then there were 4 of these, we call them guns. That's what the spray comes out of. And each of them had a shutter on it. So there were 4 more motors that twisted the shutter out of the way. And all of this other stuff was all the hardware that pumped all the air out so it would be clean. And then, but I wrote a computer program in a language called BASIC. Any of you worked with BASIC? Few? Right? All right. So this was compiled BASIC. That's about 10% of the code. But it worked. I put things on the screen so you could see what was going on. So this is my first real robotics project. And it worked. We actually did some groundbreaking experiments in this. It let us build a better system. But while that was running, and I was doing all those films, I had to do the same thing only with lasers. Because I had a big laser and a shutter. You could turn it on and off so it pulsed. And then I had a little laser that I had to line up exactly with the big one. And it went into a little tiny chamber there so we could control the environment of our samples. And we zapped these samples to see how much power it took to blow a hole in them. And the big deal was we discovered that if you pumped all the air out, I expected it would take less power from the laser to make a hole because there's no way to take the heat away. Sure, that took more power. And what we finally figured out was we weren't only pumping the air away, we were pumping the water away from our samples. It was trapped inside the material we were trying to blow up. And so rather than melting the material, we were exploding the water into steam and we're blowing holes in things much earlier than it should have. So once we figured that out, the people from whom we were getting these samples then knew what they had to do to make their samples more reliable. Because what they were finding is sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. And we proved that it's because there was water trapped in it. But every time we fired this thing, we had to take 1,000 points of data. Imagine how long that would take if we were doing it by taking a picture of an oscilloscope and then measuring everything. So being able to do this completely under the computer control was a really big deal. But then we wrapped up this experiment. That manager moved on to something else. And so I got to go back to building more of these thin film robots. So first we built a better version of the first one. That's that one. We called it the S system. And then we built an even bigger one, which was the A system. And that wasn't enough. And each one of these got more and more complicated. So then we built the really big one. This took 10 years to build. First we had to dig out the floor and put in a framework. And then we started building our chambers up. And the whole reason for these chambers, and for doing things in what we call ultra-high vacuum, is you pump all of the air out, so everything's very clean. So when you have this spray of atoms, you have only the atoms you're spraying. You don't get oxygen mixed in, you don't get water mixed in, and you're growing exactly what you think you're growing. And then we add more pieces, and more pieces. And this is a sort of aerial stitched together view of it. There's another one. And this took 10 years to build. It's still running. I'm still upgrading it and making it do new things all the time. And there is no other tool like this in the world. This is my big baby. I'm very proud of it. About 20 other people who worked on it with me. I can't claim I did it all, but I did write almost all of the software.
Sorry, what is it?
This is the world's most complicated ultra-high vacuum thin film deposition system, which is airbrushing with atoms. But it has 80 raw materials. So I can, if you say, if I stack atoms up in this order, it will behave this way, I can test your theory. And we do this with about 24 different universities and companies and science labs around the world, because no one else can do what we can do in this tool. So IBM is famous for its software, it's famous for its computers, but we do a lot of physics. Are you waving at someone over there? Looking for seats? Anybody have a seat next to you? Okay.
Is this all in the name of manufacturing semiconductors? Or?
This is, no, this is in the name of basic fundamental research. We work in a field called Spintronics, which is harvesting the power of electron spin. A regular electronics pushes electrons around, pushes charge around. Spintronics harnesses another quantum property called spin. Electrons can be spin up or spin down, and there are ways to utilize the spin without having to actually move the electrons. So it's much lower power, it can be faster. It also gives you two things to play with instead of one. And it may sound like science fiction, but it's not. Every hard drive sold today uses a spin-based head. And that was our invention. Our group invented the first spin-based head for a disk drive. Remember in the 90s, suddenly hard drives got much smaller and held way more data? That was our invention. And its successors are why the hard disk industry, why hard drives now can be so tiny and it holds so much data. We've moved on from hard drives. We're playing with other, more exotic things now. We've been trying to make a memory that works by moving magnetism around a tiny wire without any moving parts. And there's an animation of that later on. But IBM, I'm really proud of the fact I work for a company that actually spends money on basic physics in order to try and learn new things. We're always trying to have an angle where it might be technology, but we're encouraged to actually go out there and do this weird research that might work and might not. So I mentioned that it's airbrushing with that, and this is an animation of what goes on inside that big machine. And this is where you get the robot. Because I have an arm that brings my sample into that little chamber and leaves it behind. And then we close it off so it stays nice and clean. And we turn on our guns, that's that spray. And the shutters cut it off. And then we can turn off the sources. And then the arm comes back and takes it out. It looks really simple in a cartoon, believe me. It took a long time to get all those pieces to work. Because they're working inside vacuum. I have friends who work for NASA and JPL. Their satellites have to work in vacuum too. The difference is the vacuum is on the outside of their robots. It's on the inside of mine. We have the same problem, things like the stick. So this is why I say I'm an accidental roboticist. When I started this, I had a bachelor's in physics. And I thought I was going to be writing down numbers for most of my life. And instead, I have learned how to make all of these machines do what we want. Do what we mean rather than what we say. And a big chunk of what I do is write code so that members of my group can't get it to do the wrong things. Because graduate students are very clever. If your machine can do something wrong, they will find a way to do it. So my next slide is a little 2-minute movie of most of the bits of those systems I just showed you moving so you can actually see them. Because usually the cams are closed and you can't see what's going on. So sit back and enjoy the ride. For letting me use his recording. It's always kind of sticky when you want to add music to a video. You have to actually find someone who can give you permission to show it in public. So those are my big machines. And if you had told me 30 years ago that I would be writing code that we'd be doing that, I would not have believed it. There is a problem with those machines, though. You know, they cost millions of dollars, which is really cool when you're working in a lab that is being funded. But if you're at home and you want to build a robot for fun, I don't know about you, but I don't have $1 million. And so my hobby robotics are all this guy's fault. How many of you are Dr. Who fans? Few? You know what a Dalek is? I built a tiki Dalek out of bamboo and coconuts. It was a joke. It's proved to be a very popular joke. But I met some guys who were doing a show in San Francisco called Barbot. Robotic bartenders. And they really liked the Tiki Dalek and they wanted it to come to the show, so we made arrangements. And there we are, wandering around, looking at these contraptions, making cocktails with various degrees of success and various degrees of mess and disaster. And about halfway through the evening realized, this is an awful lot like my day job. I bet I could build one of these. If I built one, it wouldn't dribble on the table. And you wouldn't get the last bit of somebody else's screwdriver in your martini. So I set out to do just that, and that is ThinBot. ThinBot started out looking like this, and then like this, and then like this. It's been changing over the last 5 years, and now it's what you see on the table in front of you. Paul mentioned it's named in honor of the Thin Man movies. That is absolutely correct. How many of you remember the Thin Man movies? There we go. Nick and Nora Charles swilling martinis as they solved murders. So that was the first thing it had to make, was a good martini. And then I realized if I added a couple more bottles, it could make cosmopolitans. And it was all downhill from there. So over the years, I discovered things like you need to actually have a switch on the little arm so that it won't pour a drink on the table. There has to be a glass underneath it. Even I got so excited about getting a drink from my own robot, I pushed the pour button once with no glass underneath it. It's kind of messy. And so when we have the lights up, I'm going to point to a few more things it does. So we're going to come back to ThinBot. But this was my first hobby robot. And it's unlike my big machines, which are controlled by multiple PCs and little process controllers that are computers in their own right. ThinBot is controlled by one Arduino board. How many of you heard of Arduinos? Few? So an Arduino is a very simple computer on a chip, and it's put on these easy-to-use boards, so they're easy to use for hobbyists. So you can learn how to do it, and they also set up a programming environment. It makes it easy to learn how to program. So in some ways, this board is as powerful as the IBM Pc I had to control that first sputtering robot. There are some things it can't do, but there are a lot of things it can do. And for simple real-time control, which is what my ThinBot does, it works fine. The latest version is actually running a web server on this little tiny board. Can you see that a little better? In fact, I would pass this around, but it's slightly static sensitive, so I'm not going to send it to the whole audience. But it was great. This worked. And then I discovered you come in a little tiny version. This one I will pass around, but this is a spin. So start send it around, and it'll get back to me eventually. I trust y'all. So the difference is there I have to be willing to solder. That bigger board I showed you is all set up so you can plug things into it. It's really easy to do as a hobbyist. If you're willing to learn how to solder, these little tiny boards have almost as much power as that big board. And that's what I used to build. Please. Two more pictures of ThinBot as it's been pretty. I can show you here. So these pumps, these are called peristaltic pumps. They're used in food service. They're first developed for heart-lung machines. So there's a roller that squeezes a piece of tubing and pushes fluid. And because fluid, water, booze, whatever, is not compressible, if you push it, it creates a vacuum behind it and pulls more fluid along the line. So they're really nice for this because these are nice precision pumps. They deliver exactly 98 milliliters per minute. So I can just figure out how big a recipe is and just do it by time. And it just turns things on and off before the light mounts. They're also designed for food service. The only thing that touches the ingredients is those hoses. And those hoses can be boiled, they can be washed, they can be disinfected, and they're designed for use with food. This is one of the reasons that ThinBot won the gold medal, is it was designed for food handling. It also makes really good drinks, because my husband Andy and I, we do like a good cocktail. There's a reason the Thin Man film was an inspiration for my robot. So we took our best recipes and we transferred those for the robot to mix. And there's a way in the software for me to change it. So if I get a particularly sour bottle of cranberry juice, I can adjust the recipes once we've booted it up and make sure that the drinks people get actually taste right. So Arthur 9, oops, wrong way. There we go, Arthur 9. This little guy, which we're going to be driving around later, was for a costume. And it's controlled by two of those little boards, like the one that's going around the room. And I'm going to hold them up high so you can see his funky wheels. Can you see them? So this is where physics becomes fun. These are called Macadam Wheels. And if everything works right, they let him go sideways. Now let's see. Except he's apparently on the sticky wheel right now. Because he should be going. Yes, he got it stuck with it. So let's take a look. I'll bet he ran over one of his wires. Let's take a look. This happened the last time I put it together. Is one of the wheels got stuck.
Can you repeat the name of that wheel?
Macadam. M-E-C,
What's the difference between those and an omni wheel?
So an omni wheel is typically powered in both directions. So it's powered to go backwards and forwards, and it's powered to roll sideways. And yes, I have one step wheel. So he's going to be a little bit cranky. You can still play with him, but he's not going to go, he would normally go straight sideways. And it's because those diagonal wheels, if you spin them in opposite directions, front and back, those diagonal wheels then roll and force them to go sideways. And let's see. Yes, that's the tail. That is a knee arm, which is a little kit you can buy. And I was unfortunately not able to make it do anything fancy. You will bite his tail.
Is it okay if kids approach so they can see closer?
Oh, we're going to get to play with this a little bit later, so when I'm done talking, I'm going to encourage all the kids to come on. I was going to let them drive them around, but you may so he's a little shaky, but he will still roll around. And it's all controlled by my phone, because I have friends who built K9 from Doctor Who, which is a robot dog, and they use the radio control, you know, the joystick. I'm terrible at controlling things with the joystick. I always crash them. So I built one I can just control by tapping buttons on my phone. So we will get to play with K9 later. That's why I want the talk to be short, so you all can come up and see more things. And I'm going to have Paul pour a martini in a few minutes. This is all water, so I promise there is no liquor in the robot today. But then the other thing I discovered while I was building these was you can control these lights with an Arduino. And these are, the technical name for them is addressable light emitting diodes. One of the brand names for them is NeoPixel. That's the famous one. But what I discovered was that there were wearable versions of these. And my very first wearable electronics project, using one of these little tiny Arduino boards in it, was a tie. A power tie. And one of the cool things is those little LEDs, they're sewn on with conductive thread. There wasn't any soldering. I just had to stitch multiple times, and it's spun stainless steel, so it acts like the wires. And it's really cool. You know, it does a sort of thing. It'll change up while it's running. And in fact, I did an entire suit with this in it. There we go. Start. So that's our suit there. And this is it hanging on the wall. Unfortunately, I've also learned that the conductive thread is really fussy. And so I went to turn this on this morning, and it doesn't light. So this did actually win an award at the Pacific International Film Festival for innovation. And you can see all those little concepts on it. Those are individual addressable LEDs, like the ones in the head there. Those come in a strip. And discovering that they come in a strip makes things fun. Because you can take a piece like this, and you can sew a piece of netting to the outside of your pants. So they will slide in. I'm not going to slide it all the way in. So let's see, that just slides in that little ribbon there, and it's made of, it's translucent fabric, so they'll show through. It means you can pull them out and wash the trousers, which is important if you wear your light pants to a rock concert. But then you have a little tiny battery and a little tiny controller, which I wrapped in heat shrink plastic so that if I sweat or somebody spills a drink on me, it doesn't get into trouble. I also learned to have a way to put it to sleep. But when you turn them on, go. So imagine this down the side of my trousers. I wore them to punk rock bowling. My friends who are genuine punks were a little concerned I might get beat up. But conservative punks really like light-up pants. And it will do all sorts of things. So this costs, I think, so you can buy it by the meter or by a 5-meter roll. It's about $100 for 5 meters, which is a lot of lights. And one thing I have learned is that, as you can see, they're a little fragile at places that bend. That's where my knee is. So that's why it doesn't always get the message that it's supposed to do something. There we go. See, so it gets the message sometimes and then freezes. So the next design is just going to stop at the knees. It'll still light up, and that way it will stop breaking. But yes, so all sorts of things. Is anybody sensitive to flashing lights? Do I need to turn this off? Okay, so I should have asked that before I turned it on. I apologize. Where's the white? There we go. I actually have a white one too. So imagine you can see it up there. I've had lots of fun with this. What you can do is put them in anything. This was a dog collar from Petco. I pulled the lights out. It was the dog collar to keep your dog from getting run over, these things. Well, it turns out it's got some of that transparent ribbon in it. So I can pull it out and put some of my lights in. I sometimes wear this when I'm going out to going clubbing. Which is why I learned you have to be able to turn it off, because I ran into a very grumpy young lady who hated it and tried to rip it off me because I couldn't turn it off fast. So an off switch is really important if you're making clothes that light up. And all of these are running using that little tiny battery I showed you. That's the one tricky part about this. If you're a hobbyist, I'm using what are called lithium polymer batteries. If you mishandle them, they can overheat. Bigger versions of these lithium batteries are the ones that have been causing fires in the hoverboards. So you need to learn how to handle them right. But they're not hard to use. So all I suggest is don't be afraid of them, and make sure there's either a grown-up or a child in the room who actually understands the right ways to use them. So I had a remote. I keep distracting myself. There we go. So believe it or not, that's the last slide. Oh, one more. So now we get to bring the lights up, questions, and I hope a little bit of fun, even though Arthur's a little bit lame right now. So we can.
Software question. You mentioned that your very first real robot was programmed in BASIC. What languages do you use now at work in?
So so my hobby robots are all Arduino based at this point, which uses a version of C++. The Arduino IDE, which is the something development environment, is what the I stands for. What? Integrated development environment. The front end for it works in C++. There are versions which program in other languages. Most of my big machines are programmed using an environment called LabVIEW, which is a graphical programming environment. It's actually the same thing that some of the Lego Mindstorms robots use. So you put together modules and you wire data from one point to another, so you can control the order that things happen in by wiring it on the screen, and then the computer translates that into the actual code that's sent to the machine. Now my big tools, I'm not only doing the part on the computer, but I have all of these other instruments which have to be programmed as well, and most of them have their own languages. There's a touch screen, which has its own language, which I had to learn for things that the computer doesn't care about, but the user does. It's like, if you want to pump the air out of the machine, there's a touch screen and you hit the pump button. If you want to vent it, if you want to let the air back in, there's a button to do that, but first you have to enter a combination so that you don't accidentally lean on the button and let the air back in at the wrong time. That would be bad. My manager used to be really good at that, at finding the wrong button to push. He got better. I mean, we've been working together for 25 years, But the early days, he'd been a postdoctoral student, and we started working together before he was a manager. And sometimes twitchy fingers and too sensitive a button, things go wrong. I invented things by accident on occasion. So adding the lock of some kind. If you're building an actual mechanical panel, you can have a cover so somebody can't accidentally hit the switch. When you're doing software with touchscreen, you have some way to make sure that you don't do something you want on accident. Like the switch on the robot. So Paul, would you like to order a drink from the robot?
Okay.
So I mentioned this is running on a web server. So if you look right now, it says, please place your glass in the arm.
So, place the,
Just place a glass in the arm. Okay, and it's running. Now, I'm building a faster version of this. That was the card I was waving around. So once it knows that there's a glass in the arm, it moves it into position again so it won't pour on the table. And now we get to wait while it builds the menu. So while we wait for the menu to set up, any more questions while we're waiting? Yes?
Oh, I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on driverless vehicles? And then also, what do you think about the new iRobot? Do you think you'd ever come to that point where all of these robots are running us?
So I think that autonomous vehicles will be a good thing. There are obviously growing pains in figuring out how to integrate them, but first of all, the amount of liberation that it will give people who are otherwise homebound is really important. One of the things I noticed, Paul mentioned that I'm a Doctor Who fan, and yes, it is still loading, it's just really slow. So one of the things I've noticed going to science fiction conventions over the last 20 years is that because of the invention of the lightweight, relatively low-cost mobility scooters, we now have people joining us at conventions who never used to be able to go because they would have been in a wheelchair, needed an attendant, or just couldn't last all day going from room to room on their feet in a crowd. And with the mobility scooters, now they can join the fun. And I think that autonomous vehicles are going to be a big jump that way by relieving us from the tyranny of having to be able to drive a car. And let's refresh because it's supposed to be back. It's working.
So
We got
Kevin,
motion. Yes.
related to the second question, you read iRobot when you were a kid?
It was one of my favorite books. Absolutely. I read all of the robot books because there are more robot stories. So if you enjoyed iRobot, everybody enjoyed it. How many people actually read it? All right, good. So I recommend it highly. It is a collection of short stories. So if you look at this stat book, you can take it in chunks. And each story is a different sort of science mystery as the robots develop in Asimov's universe. And I love the way that it developed. And there we go. Now we have a menu.
Woo, all right.
So there are currently 25 things on this menu. That's why it took so long to load. That's why I'm working on a faster version. So I believe you mentioned martinis.
yes.
There are 3 versions. It does a classic gin martini. It does a vodka martini for people who are allergic to gin. I have friends who are. And then it, of course, does the Vesper, which was James Bond's invented martini from Casino Royale. Those are the first 3 drinks we programmed into the robot.
Well, I'll order a vodka martini.
All right, so
Vodka martini.
there's a button that says I'd like a vodka. All right. And now it's going to churn. Yes, it is going. So don't go away yet because it's going to show you. Just going to show him the recipe to make sure it's what he actually wants. See, the screen is changing. There we go. That look good.
Okay, shaken, not stirred, okay.
So, and we hit pour it. And now it's running. So has to calculate all the times for each ingredient. Make sure there's enough in the bottles, and then off we go. Pour it. Notice the lights are climbing as it fills. The robot is its own progress bar.
So Kevin, can you adjust the mood to
gin or vodka?
There are two ways you can adjust the recipe.
Uh-huh.
One is, there is a custom drink menu that I don't normally give people access to because it takes them long enough to pick 1 in 25.
Uh-huh.
The other way is, if
Does that mean it's ready?
that means it's ready.
Okay.
In case you're wondering why there's a dog on the arm, that is Asta, who was as famous as the Livermore Journal. Yeah.
It's just water.
As you saw, it has gotten bigger and more complex every time I've upgraded. It now takes 12 bottles. It can do martinis, cosmos, kamikazes, Manhattans. It always has several non-alcoholic drinks in the menu. And one of the new things it does is I can say, go to non-alcoholic, and then it only displays the non-alcoholic drinks. I was asked to bring it to a Christmas party where there were going to be children present. While the robot was up and running, and at that time we thought we were going to be able to set it up on a counter like that and just let people use it. That wasn't what happened. And it seemed like 10 children chasing each other with swords were 1,000. So I trusted none of you kids would do that, right? In the middle of a party, would not be chasing each other around the house with swords.
Kevin,
Yep.
Bill said he wants a cosmopolitan.
If you want a cosmopolitan,
Go
well,
ahead.
come on up.
Ask it.
You know, it may not out for them right now, because I think I just turned on the non-alcoholic mode. But go ahead, put a glass in.
Kevin,
Yeah.
do you ever foresee a future in which your drink menu can biometrically sense if the person is underage or not, and serve them only non-alcoholics?
Not my robot.
In this case, it's not an issue.
So, ThinBot is an art project. The bartending robots at Robo Games are an art category, and this was designed as an art project, which is why the lighting is built into it. The original design was supposed to not only be kind of Art Deco, but look like the center column of the Doctor's TARDIS, except that it doesn't go up and down, the pumps just go round and round. So we now have just a non-alcoholic drinks.
Kevin, if I wanted my cosmopolitan cold, does refrigeration come with this?
Normally it does. Normally would be a bucket of ice under the table and a fountain pump, and there would be water running through all the holes and then back on the table, circulating the whole time. And this blue thing on the front is 9 pounds of aluminum that the water runs through first. So that aluminum is ice cold, and all the ingredients go through that, and that gives you a nice cold drink. But there's no ice, which means that's a nice cold drink at full strength. And if you've ever made a martini from gin and vodka and or vermouth that were stored in the fridge or the freezer, it doesn't taste right. Because it turns out when you shake or stir a drink with ice, you add water. It's the ice melting that cools the drink off. So bottle number 9 in ThinBot is water. And I add 20% to 25% water to every drink it makes, and that makes them taste right. They actually don't taste right unless you add that cold water. So why did you ask it for the cranberry juice is actually a virgin Cape Cod. So give that one a try. This one takes longer to pour because it's mostly cranberry juice. Now I've got it pouring very small drinks, just 1.5 ounces, because otherwise we'd be waiting here for a very long time. It'll take a while. And just, we're due to it. Now it's going. So yes.
Do you ever think that your drink bot could take over bartending?
Not mine, again, this is an art project. There are several commercial products. My favorite is sort of semi-commercial. It's made by a group called Roboticist. They're friends of mine. We met at one of the Barbot events. And they and I came up with the Peristaltic pump at the same time. At that point, everybody had been using air because aquarium pumps are cheap. So you can push air to the top of the bottle to push fluid out through a hose. But it's hard to get a precise measurement. And when I mentioned that the drink bots drift a lot, that was why. We're using air pressure. It's very hard to turn things off when you're using air pressure. It's about to pour. Yes?
Do you think robots will ever achieve sentience?
Well, a major effort at my lab is in what's called cognitive computing, which is computing that functions more like a brain does than an integrated circuit does.
Well, that's funny. On the industrial area of Terabella in Mountain View, there is a company, a building, and in the front parking lot, there's these white robots. They're about this big. Do you know who that is and what they're doing there?
So now they're
Right in Terabella, pretty big.
robots?
They're shaped just like robots, and
Oh.
they have them moving around the parking lot, and there's nobody there.
All right, cheers.
They're using robots for security.
But those look more like dogs.
Those are more cone-shaped.
That's probably actually someone doing research. on-
How is it?
Doing research
Good?
on humanoid
Wet.
robots.
It's wet, yes. I can guarantee that today is making things a little wet. It can't do beer. So one thing that these pipes can't do is anything with bubbles. Because that pinching the roller to create the vacuum, if you've got bubbles in the fluid, well, that is gas that breaks the vacuum. So the fluid wouldn't stay in the hoses. It would dribble all the time because the gas coming out of the beer or the soda would push the fluid out of the nozzle. And I have ideas on that. But I may start over with a whole new robot. I'm thinking Mojitos would be a good shout.
You have to prime the pump?
Yes, and that's actually one of the things I like about these pumps is they're self-priming. If you spin them, you put the end of the hose into fluid, it will suck it out. You can pull it out of 2-foot columns, so I'm operating well within their parameters. Somebody asked if I cornered the market on these pumps. These are made by a little company in Florida named Anco. They normally supply to medical equipment companies and food service companies, and I had persuaded them to sell me a few pumps. They decided they could sell them as development samples, and they are willing to sell to other hobbyists. So if you're in the mood to build a robot and want to know, I am perfectly happy to share my sources. It's what I have found is generally while we compete at Robo Game for the medals, we are generally a pretty congenial lot. We like to help each other solve their problems. So it's
Is ThinBot patent? Did you patent?
no, I did not patent ThinBot. Remember when I mentioned the part about this is like my day job? Well, it is like my day job, which means intellectual property that I create related to my work belongs to IBM. So I didn't think of that when I started the project, and I was publishing on my blog pictures of the work of projects. Well, that starts the clock on whether you can patent something. You have 12 months from when you first publish to be able to patent it. So I sat down with my company's legal department, and we agreed to that no one would try to pursue patents. There's some question whether this is actually innovative enough to patent in the first place, because they're all existing parts. But it's important that I work for IBM, and I'm very proud to. And that particular problem didn't occur to me until after we'd already built the robot. So I was very happy with the solution we came to.
Is ThinBot competing again in this year's Robo Games?
ThinBot is. This is, in fact, ThinBot 3.0. According to the way I count. Andy thinks it should be 4 or 5. By the way, this is my husband, Andy. Wave hi.
Hi, Andy.
And, but this is really the third real incarnation of what it does. And in particular, because I'm about to go to the faster processor, which we tested yesterday. It now works on the bench. I was not going to try swapping the brains out the morning before demonstrating it to you. You could pretty much guarantee that everything would go wrong.
And I just want to add, sorry to interrupt, but Robo Games will be in Pleasanton
Yes,
Fairground in April.
April 8th, 9th,
There's
and 10th.
the flyers, so you can grab one. And I think you're going to be there for us, and David will be there too.
I'll be there, Dave will be there.
Dave.
The team that won BattleBots will be there. Actually, Paul was one of the other people who built Barbots. I keep meeting him. But I would never want to go against him in the combat arena. I don't build combat robots because the idea of building something to let somebody else smash it just kind of breaks my heart. But if you've ever wanted to see combat robotics in person, it's right here in Pleasanton, just a month and a half away. So, any other?
There was a question there, yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Does yours or any of the others like put the martini, the olive in the martini? Or
I'm trying to remember whether the perfect Manhattan buck could
No.
drop a cherry. So in the rules, you are allowed to add the garnish. The rules allow you to add the garnish. One of the reasons that ThinBot has been successful is because it can do so many drinks. And the drink recipes and the food handling came first, and then making it pretty was second. I'm very happy that it actually converged onto this elegant Art Deco science fiction design, because my first idea was I could build it like a TARDIS, the center column in the TARDIS, and then gave that up, and it actually came back to looking like that when I was done. So that was kind of fun.
There was a question in
Solids
the-
handling is a completely different engineering challenge.
Yeah, as Andy says, solids handling is another engineering thing. You can't count on the cherries or the olives or the lemon wedges or any of that having the same shape. So this is the challenge, for instance, of a mojito bot, is you have to deal with mint leaves and lime. So I have some ideas, but until I've actually built the prototype, I'm not giving my ideas away.
But on the subject of the garnish, the olives and such, if you tied the ThinBot together with a Rube Goldberg device to put the olive in the martini, it'd be visual dynamite.
Well, it's kind of Rube Goldberg already, but success to me is important. We have actually taken ThinBot to party with friends' houses where nobody was technologically phobic. And that was the problem at the Christmas party, is some of the guests had never seen a drink-making robot. So I had to stand next to it and explain all night. By the end of the evening, people were comfortable enough with it that I could walk away. But for the first part of the party, I was babysitting because people wanted to know what it was, and they were a little afraid of it and didn't want to break it. And that was okay. But at New Year's, we had it set up for a party 2 years ago. I showed the first guests who arrived how it worked. They showed the next guests, and the only thing I had to worry about was keeping the bottles full. So in a small party, it actually works really, really nicely. We don't use it at home because this only has 12 bottles, and like I said, we like cocktails, and we have about 200 bottles. So, but for what it does a very good job, and I'm very proud of it.
Kevin, what's your advice to the kids who want to someday work at IBM and also compete at Robo games?
Well, so you can compete in Robo games now. There are youth and junior levels at Robo games, and there are clubs and individuals competing in all of them, including something called Nano Sumo, where you build a little tiny robot that can't weigh more than an ounce or something. And the object is to push somebody else's robot out of a little tiny ring. That is the entire, and that's a whole category. There are categories for building a robot that climbs ribbons, or that can follow a line on the floor. There are all these challenges that are designed for different ages and different levels. And while it might be too late to put something together this year, I encourage you to go check it out. It is so cool. I will advise you to bring earplugs, because when the heavyweight robots are battling in the arena, it's loud. But it's all these people who like to make stuff. Some of them do a better job than others, but it's just so much fun. And every so often you get something spectacular going on in the arena, like flames or sparks or
Robot flying up to the
Our
ceiling.
robots flying into the ceiling, yes.
Okay, well, now's our demo portion, and also the fun part where you can come closer and play with Arthur 9 and order a drink from ThinBot. And
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed, we did miss one question, so what was, you got the answer? So there are Lego categories, there's a whole section. that is all Lego robots. So, yes. RoboGames.com